want to be really good and you want to have that dynamic. You said that producer dynamic of business coming into you, a lot of inbound activity. You got to be worthy of that. Like you got to be worthy of that inbound activity. Like you should be someone that restaurateurs seek out, for that kind of risk management advice, that kind of business advice. That's how you become a trusted advisor.
Welcome to Insurance Shoptalk. This is the podcast where the world of commercial insurance gets a little closer to home. I'm your host, Eric Stein, and in every episode, we're taking a deep dive into the insurance industry, from the latest news and trends to in-depth interviews with insurtech experts, carriers, and agency newsmakers. We're covering it all. So sit back, tune in, and let's start the conversation. All right, everybody. Glad to have Nick Lamparelli with us today from Insurance Nerds out of Naples, beautiful Naples, Florida. Nick, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Can't wait to have this conversation with you, Eric.
I love it, man. But before we get started, I have to do a shameless plug, though. The new book, and I know we had the conversation. Thanks again for having me on your show. What's the name of that particular podcast? I know you have a couple.
The Assignment of Benefits podcast.
I thought it was about the books.
Oh, you're right. Wrong podcast. It's the Yellow Book Road, and the podcast you were on was the Hear It from the Pen series.
Hear It from the Pen. That's the one. Thank you. Because I know you got like 3 or 4 of these podcasts. So I got
Yes. Now even I'm confused now.
Yeah, exactly. But thanks for having me on. But for those of you who haven't been on the podcast or listened to before, I just want to welcome you. Number one, number two, let you know that I'm excited that I just published a new book about the growing of my agency on Amazon. It's called The Blueprint: An Insurance Agency's Unconventional Rise to the Top, and it pretty much is a quick read of how I built Insured Solutions, my agency, sort of the trials and tribulations of what I went through. And then toward the end of the book, it really gets into an actual blueprint of how I use nearshore, offshore, to help my back office side, how I use digital marketing, and I created my own internal high deductible work comp program, and sort of the pluses and minuses of doing that, because I get a lot of calls from agents on that. So it's really geared to agents, CSRs, agency principals, producers, anyone trying to learn a little bit more about marketing or building out an agency or a program. And hopefully you'll enjoy it. And again, it's Amazon on Kindle, paperback, and hardback. So thanks for your support on that. And Nick, thank you again, Nick. So Nick, today we've been talking a little bit, and we thought that a good topic these days is, because I know a lot of agents are trying to look for other ways to come into a customer, to not just talk about specifically insurance, but really the more holistic approach of the risk management side, the comprehensive coverage side, more value. We're all looking to add that into the conversation because you've got to differentiate yourself. And I wanted you to sort of speak on that because of your background in insurance, and if you could kind of give everyone a little bit of a snippet of your background, and then a little bit about your thoughts on leading into that with a new prospect, especially that doesn't know you yet when you're speaking about commercial insurance.
Yeah. So Eric, I've been in insurance for almost 3 decades now. Everything from mom and pop corner agency selling auto and homeowners to commercial, middle-sized commercial, large commercial, have been on the analytics side of things, worked for carriers, worked for brokers, um, have pretty much seen a lot of what ends up happening in insurance. 8 years ago, I co-founded an MGA in the flood space, and left that a couple years ago. And right now, there was a lot of valuable learnings from that, Eric. One in particular was I had a lot of vendors selling to me, and um, it's interesting. Like a vendor selling to me, and you realize like they don't know what I do, right? And or they don't know to the degree of what I do and what's really keeping me up at night, sort of thing. And I would sit there and help the vendors through the sales cycle, my sales cycle, right? And I realized that, geez, I think I could sell their product better than they can. I think I could market it too better than they can. And so, a year and a half ago, I had the opportunity to take over Insurance Nerds, and that was what I wanted to go after, was help B2B firms sell into the insurance ecosystem, right? But the B2B could be a brokerage, right? Trying to also figure out how to sell things. So I just feel as though over time I've developed an acumen for using creative ways to take what it is that what we do every day, Eric, and we take for granted, and repackaging it in such a way to establish yourself as a thought leader. I think everything that I do today centers around you're a commodity unless you're a trusted advisor. That could be technology sales to the insurance ecosystem, but that could be brokerage sales to corporate accounts. Until you are valued as a trusted advisor, you are a commodity. And I think that's what it is I'm trying to help most firms with insurance nerds is bust out of that commoditized element and really separate yourself so you're doing less outbound activity and more having more inbound activity towards what it is that you're doing. Shortening sales cycles.
Oh yeah, I mean everything you're saying is like music to a producer's ears, shorten sales cycles, making things easier, and more efficient.
Yeah. But towards our conversation, um, no one really wants to buy insurance, right? Like even on the corporate side, right? It's a necessity. So corporate, commercial, large, business insurance is different than personal insurance. There's less of a price factor that comes in, but the price factor is still there. But no one really wants to buy insurance. It's hard for them to see the value of it. And so to me, if you're selling insurance and that's how you get compensated, I know this is going to sound ironic, but the best way to sell insurance is to not sell it. The best way to sell insurance is to not talk about it, right? The best way to sell insurance is to sell yourself and sell the value of everything else. So, for example, if your specialty is in, let's say, restaurants, I would not be selling restaurant insurance. I would be selling data, information, analytics, thought leadership around the restaurant business. I would help them become better business owners of that restaurant. And oh, by the way, they can buy an insurance policy from you, and that's how you're ultimately going to get compensated. But that's delivering a lot of value to, let's say, that restaurant owner before you even ask for the insurance policy. And that's kind of how I frame this out, Eric.
No, that's perfect. Like, so let's get into the weeds a little bit. Let's say using that restaurant example, how would you approach it? Like maybe give well, we know how someone would come in just straight with insurance. So go the opposite of how it should be done
Yep.
in a professional value added way on that you get in the door, initial conversation, what do
Yep.
you?
So if you decide restaurants your niche, but this can be any niche, and I think it's going to work the same way. But let's just use restaurants because I think everyone that's listening can understand this because we've all frequented them, right? There's a tremendous amount of risk in owning a restaurant, and shocker, restaurants go out of business a lot. It's actually not a good business, right? So the economic pressure that exists on a restaurant owner is real. It's significant. It's everything from slip and fall liabilities to food poisoning to fires, right? Strangely, a lot of fires occur at restaurants at nighttime. I wonder why that is. Um, so there's a lot that can go wrong. You got workers' comp claims. There's food delivery. So you have commercial auto. There's so much that can go wrong. That's what I would focus on. I would focus on all of the things that could go wrong, and I would find or have at least a database of content that can discuss every little thing that can go wrong. That's almost how I would start as an insurance professional. And let me be very frank here. If you decide that, let's say, restaurants is your thing, and you can't have a discussion about restaurant economics with the business owner, you might want to reconsider selling restaurant insurance to restaurants. Like that's the standard I'm talking about. You almost have to endeavor to become a guru in restaurant economics. That means you're going to have to jump in and look at white papers and third party consultative research reports about the restaurant business. You're going to have to read S&P. You're gonna have to go in deep on. I would study the public companies. I would study McDonald's, and I don't can't think off the top of my head which other ones actually own restaurants, but I would study those financial statements and understand like, okay, the best of the best. McDonald's,
You
for
gotta listen,
instance.
like we talked about, you gotta listen to Acquired on
Yes.
the restaurant industry, right? Like they
Yeah.
be able to
Like
deep dive into that.
if you want to be really good and you want to have that dynamic, you said that producer dynamic of business coming into you, a lot of inbound activity, you got to be worthy of that. Like you got to be worthy of that inbound activity. Like you should be someone that restaurateurs seek out, for that kind of risk management advice, that kind of business advice. That's how you become a trusted advisor. You have to bring like really good advice and then be trustworthy. It's pretty much that simple, right? And the advantage is that most producers are never, ever, ever going to put in that kind of effort to become that knowledgeable in their niche. But to me, I don't see any other way. Anything outside of that, and you're a commodity. You can
Yeah,
be
to that
easily,
point, like even when you start speaking about niches, which is everyone's trying to focus on these days, which is smart, is that the first thing the producer does is they try to understand the coverages for the niche, because we are so insurance focused versus the bigger picture conversation should probably be, can I adapt to the plumbing industry if that's my niche? Do I understand the economics and the model and the business side of it first versus
yeah.
studying the coverage for, the gaps that happen on the coverages for plumbers, right?
I've seen Eric, I've seen this in action. I've seen introverted engineers end up becoming significant producers of business because as an engineer, they had some specialty. Let's say aeronautics. They're just really good. Like they studied it in school. They worked for Boeing, like they just know the business inside and out, especially like the things that can go wrong. And they're successful because they can get really deep, like a mile deep into the topic and actually bubble to the surface problems that whatever the customer is that's looking to transfer risk can bubble to the surface things that they have not even thought about. That is a differentiator. You get to that level, you are a differentiator. Like you are going to be invited to speak. You're like you can there and there's so many easy ways to generate inbound activity once you're on the speaking tour, once you're invited to podcasts, right? Like but you need that level of wisdom around a particular topic in order for you to have that kind of credibility.
True, true. So like, what would you recommend, other than if you just had a personal background, like in the restaurant side, maybe you grew up in that industry with your family or something, and let's say again, sticking with the restaurant theme, let's say that's your niche you're going to go after, what ways would you educate yourself, on the industry, not just the big players, like you said, that's easy to find, getting into the weeds of food spoilage, the management of the time, the labor management, point of sale systems, yeah, the turnover, how to hire, how to recruit,
Yeah.
train, like these are all the business sides of it, right? How do you go about doing it if you're not in that field?
Well, I would say if you I think everyone has What's the saying? I came up with the saying and I can't even remember it. No one is Eric, no one is good at everything. I would say that there's no one that's good at most things, but everyone's good at something. What's that something? Right? What's that thing? I don't care if it's WWE wrestling. If that's the thing that you're highly knowledgeable about, there's someone that could benefit from your wisdom about, you know, who is the world champion in 2021? Was it Steve Austin or The Rock? Everyone's good at something. I would I would advise that you lean on that, right? Because listen, if you pick restaurants because you think it's going to be lucrative, but you have no actual interest in it, like you find it dull and boring, you're going to hit a rough patch. There's going to be a gap in time where it's like no business is coming in. And will you need momentum to overcome that, to overcome those speed bumps. And that's why I would advise, like, one, you're the engineer and aeronautics, good, perfect, right? But if you're just, a layperson, you're still good at something. There's still things that either you're good at or you have a high degree of interest around. Like it intrigues you. You're curious about. You're so curious that you would spend your free time, evenings and weekends reading about it. That's where I would focus on. Like there's got to be everyone has something. I don't care if you were a teenage boy and you were in your basement playing video games throughout your high school and your college career. There's guess what? You actually have an interest. Video games. Those folks need risk transfer too. Like there is a way that you can manipulate your interest and your skill set to benefit that. And that's the direction I would go in. I would definitely not jump into something just because it was pure lucrative. Like, oh, there's probably a lot of money to be made in, let's say, technology and insuring companies like Microsoft or Amazon. There probably is, but if you don't have an acumen or an interest in that, I think that's going to be a tough road. Like that's going to be really difficult for you to put in the extra effort to read a 10K, to read an annual report, to read a white paper from some consulting firm, to listen to an acquired podcast for
Right.
2 hours, right? Like I would link those two together. For me, Eric, in particular, it was I have a science background, got into insurance, and then rediscovered my science background when I got into catastrophe insurance. And that's what I've leaned on. Like to me, you can plot me down any day of the week. You can plot me down at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I can have a fruitful discussion with anyone about natural catastrophes. I've now built a career on it, and I didn't have any particular expertise in the beginning, but I had curiosity. And to me, I called it Discovery Channel every day. To me, I was like going in, it was like Discovery Channel. It was like I was learning, like watching documentaries on hurricanes and tornadoes. And it was so interesting that I was able to over the course of a few short years kind of absorb it all and then was able to regurgitate it to a marketplace that was hungry for that information. And Eric, frankly, I didn't even realize they were hungry for it. I thought everyone just sort of knew what an EF5 tornado was and how fast it went and what kind of damage it caused and how random it was. But apparently that's not true. People don't
No,
know
no,
those
you're right.
facts.
My favorite niche I heard an agent of ours try to go after or didn't go after it is the breweries for beer. He loves like trying different beers and the whole idea of
Beautiful.
it, and he's into the science of it and the fun aspects of it. And so that was when it was like, I don't know, 10 years ago when it was really taking off, like in California, you know.
And now it's really taken off. Now it's like every community, even here in Naples, we have two breweries, right? Where they even like created a restaurant around the brewery. So take that. That's a great example because that was a nascent, I remember when Sam Adams first launched and that was like the thing, right? But it had a slow transition, but then it hit an inflection point and it exploded. The person that you're speaking to, right? Like that person likely you can just plop them down and they can have a very intelligent conversation with pretty much anyone about craft brewing. right? And what yeast you use and what, all of that stuff. Are you kidding? Like that's valuable.
Yeah,
And
he's
not
like
only is it
buddies with all the owners, because they're all
exactly, that's what I was
same
going to say.
house.
Like
Yeah.
not only is it valuable for you in a prospecting means, but even like when you've convinced them that you should be the one that they trust to do the business, now like this can be like a fruitful ongoing relationship. Like you guys have so much in common
They're kicking back,
around that.
having beers together as they discuss, whatever the business.
Exactly.
Hey, everybody, it's Eric. I just want to pop in for a quick announcement. Exciting news. I just launched my new book on Amazon. It's called The Blueprint: An Insurance Agency's Unconventional Rise to the Top. And it goes through a little bit about how I built the agency Insured Solutions since 2009 to today. And the blueprint in terms of how I actually did it with the tech stack, the offshore, nearshore talent, and digital marketing techniques that I use. So pick up a copy today on Amazon. Thanks, guys. Yes, yeah.
Try some new ones. Okay, while you're sipping some beers. Okay, what has changed in your business? I'm looking around. Like your tanks, didn't they used to be copper? Why are they silver now? What did you do? Oh, you switched metal. I wonder if there's a risk there, right? Like that's the degree of wisdom that you need. And that's
Well,
all
like
you
you said,
need.
you gotta love it, what you're doing in that particular area. So don't go after just the dollar signs. That's a great point. And I have a daughter who's graduating from college, going after her first job now. She wants to take like a year off, potentially go to grad school later. And she's explaining to me what it is that she's interested in. And then, but she's worried, okay, that's like I can't ask for that because that's like, that's 10 years away to go after that. And I'm like, well, try to go. You may be right. You're probably right because you're a newbie, you're raw. So you've got
Yeah.
to start out with what you really want, what you love. Ask if you can be put in that particular area in that company on that topic, and if they can't do it, fine, but at least you're promoting that that's what your desire is, and is that something that's going to make you happy?
Yeah, and like that's great advice. That's exactly it. To me, it's you and I are probably fairly close to the same age. Um, I probably have just a few years on you, not many, but just a few. Um, so work is hard, right? Especially in the early days. I have a daughter that's out of college now, and I have to hear her complain about like, oh, they have me coming in on a Saturday, and that sucks, and all of this other stuff. So work is hard, and it for you to be really good at what you're doing, you have to have some degree of desire towards it. So I don't like the advice, follow your passion, because as a young person, you may not have been exposed to enough to know what your real passions are, but at least lean on things that you're curious about
You
that,
think you think you want, and then
yeah, that it's going to drive interest.
and the goal, hey, you find like the whole fail fast piece, you're going to
Ex-
find out very quickly, oh
exactly.
my God, this isn't what I thought. And like, I don't know about your kids, but like mine are coming out of college thinking they know it all already. I'm like,
I think
what
that's
the
every kid.
I mean, I've just never seen such pompousness, from a
Except
like
we were the same way, Eric.
I don't remember that. I remember being very appreciative.
So it's a good learning lesson, I think, for producers. There's no difference between an early stage producer or someone that's like um even middle stage, like trying to advance up, and someone who's graduating from college. It's like the same thing, right? It's fail fast. But I look back and I look at like I've made more mistakes in my career than I've been successful. Like if I can be really honest, like I've done some really dumb things.
Same
I've done
here.
some really dumb things in meetings. I've had some really bad lies. Um, you know, I've had some, and I think a lot of it comes down to integrity, right? Like in much of my career, I did not do what I said I would do, right? And it took me a long time to kind of square that away of like, I still struggle with it. I think everyone still struggles with it. Like we're over ambitious, we over promise things, but I think the lesson for producers is that anything good takes a little bit of time. Nothing good is going to come at you right away. And so, what sort of effort do you want to put in? That's why I would lean towards doing something that like you wake up in the morning and you're actually excited to do. That's the advice I give to my daughter is find something that you're excited to do, then it's not work. You're looking forward to it. Of course, we all want it to be lucrative, but I think the hard lesson for producers and for younger generation is that it's not all about the money, right? If as a matter of fact, I'm going to pull like a Jedi mind trick here. It's the opposite. I think the more wisdom that you can generate for yourself, and the more wisdom that you can share with the world, the money will come following you. But that's that's a for I think a lot of folks, that's going to be a struggle, right? Because like, no, I got bills to pay, right? But if you can do your own Jedi mind trick and just say like, yeah, I got bills to pay, but am I paying for bills that I really need to be paid? Could I downsize, right? Like, what does life really need to look like? I do think it really boils down to wisdom, and I think in our conversation, it's all about wisdom.
True, true. Yeah, as long as I don't support my daughter as she's going through the wisdom completely, so anyway, that's the balancing act. But you want to kind of have it both ways, if you will, like go after your path, what you really want to do, and get into the most
And
lucrative area possible. And
yeah,
it's hard on a start out, when you're starting out, but you don't have to. She had friends, graduating from University of Miami with her, this is as you know, being in Florida, is a $90,000 a year,
party
plus.
school.
Yes, party school, So now we're looking at 400K without any other,
Oh
entertainment.
yeah,
So wait, what do
but
you do with
but
that? Go sit in retail, and work at Gap. No, that's not going to happen. Sorry.
yeah. Although that would be a good learning experience. You learn a little bit about sales,
You
that
do
way.
that in the
But
summer. You do that in the
you,
summer, not
yeah,
as
yeah,
your.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. So, I'm having a mind meltdown here because I was going to say something around that, but it'll come back to me.
Yeah, no problem. Tying it back to business. So now you've gotten your niche. Let's just stay with the restaurant theme. Now it's time to, now become the expert in the insurance aspects of that niche too. You got to have both. You got to know the niche and you got to know the insurance pieces.
Yeah.
And also the really, how to help that business owner increase their net income, which in risk management can be done, as with things like return to work on the workers' comp, the post-hiring, questionnaire when you hire an employee to make sure they can, perform the functions of the job, which is legal to ask those sorts of questions once you have a post on offer accepted. So talk a little bit about how to now add in the risk management piece, to that, and the questioning
Well,
to the value add.
well, you have to be really good. So you have to understand the insurance concept. So you have two tracks that you have to study up on. One, so let's stay with restaurants. You have to know a lot about the restaurant business, and you have to know a lot about property insurance, liability insurance, especially as pertains to restaurants. Now, with the two together, you can identify, okay, well, what are the risks being transferred? And in this day and age, by the way, I now remember what I was going to say because it comes down to technology. In this day and age, there's enough technology in place, right? Like, so you talk about workers' comp and getting people back to work, right? You're going to have to understand the workers' comp business a little bit and understand like where money is kind of falling through the cracks. So, how is a restaurant getting charged for workers' comp? Well, they're getting charged probably by employee, by payroll, right? But then there's other things like the modifier, right? And I believe there's another factor that I'm drawing a blank on. So you got these two modifiers that drive. So a restaurant business is going to have some sort of like typical or average loss costs. that's associated with it that the underwriter is using. You know, like, okay, restaurant industry in total for the state of, let's say, Florida behaves in a particular way. How does this one company behave compared to its peers? Does it have worse claims or better claims? Right. And you, as the broker, the producer of that business, you need to switch hats. You need to put on a risk management hat, right? Because ultimately, if you want to do right by them on the economics of the insurance program, you got to find a way to reduce losses, right? There's not, it's more than just like, well, let me just have 50 different companies quote this. They're all going to pretty much quote it the same way unless you have additional data that you can bring to the table. So Eric, it is around like you need to understand the insurance concepts, what's driving the premium, what how your prospect or client is going to, how their risk is going to behave in a financial model that the underwriter is going to throw at it. So how do we drive it down? Oh, well, we need to reduce the frequency and severity. Okay, well, how do we do that? How do we okay, well, you know what would be helpful if we have signs up in the bathroom that force people to wash their hands. I don't know how well that works, but you know that's an insurance thing that's being forced on. But where else? Like, does there need to be a sign in front of the grill that says "Do not put your hand on the grill"? I don't know. Maybe, right? Like other, for like woodworking, Eric, there's all kinds of safeguards, right? You like buy a saw from Home Depot, like an electrical saw. There are all kinds of safeguards on that thing so you don't chop your hand off, right? You got to think that way
Right.
in
I think in
terms of,
restaurants they offer like the no slip shoes and the no slip flooring for reduce that slip and fall
yep,
exposure. And again, asking the client, how do you deal with your claims now? And do you, when they are, when they, do you try to, immediately treat the claim? Um, and B, if they are out of work, will you offer return to work? Or are you just going to let them sit at home, because
yeah.
they can't stand.
So if for the restaurant, which is probably the majority of them, they probably don't have a risk management plan in place. You as the broker can in parallel be the risk manager for the restaurant. You won't technically have that title, but you should act like it. And you should draft the risk management plan, especially with the AI tools that we have now. Like it would not be too complex. Similar to writing a book, Eric, right? Like put in put in some effort. It might take 2 or 3 months, but now you essentially have a template risk management plan that can be applied almost across the board to any restaurant. And you are correct. Like, what is an underwriter going to want to see? They're going to want to see that you have a risk management plan in place. They're going to want to see that if it's winter, we don't have that in Florida, but let's say it's up in the Northeast and it's snowing and people are walking in and out, so the floor is getting wet, creating a slip and fall situation. What's your plan? What do you do? How do you document that? How do you prove that you not only have the plan, but you're executing on it? Eric, I spoke to someone this weekend um about they have built a software that works with, like, let's say, nursing homes. It essentially creates a map of where all the electrical panels are, where what do the electrical panels control. Apparently this is a big problem. Electrician, like the power goes out or something trips, electrician shows up and it takes them hours to figure out, like, for this light we can't find the freaking panel. You think it would be this one that's right here next to it, but we found it and it was 4 stories up, kind of thing. And they map this all out, and their goal ultimately is to sell software but also to attach an insurance product to it, because that is validation to an underwriter. That is like, wow, you guys have gone well beyond risk management. You guys know where all the panels are. You're doing inspections on them and making sure they're not arcing or overheating. You're doing all of these things. Eric, that's the degree that's required. I think I was at a ethics, um, not an ethics hearing, but an ethics CE class, um, where the professor started the class with, show of hands. How many of you in here are producers, agents, or brokers? And almost every hand went up. And then said, how many of you think of yourselves as risk managers for your clients? And only a few hands went up. And I was like, every hand should have gone up. That's the difference,
Right.
right?
And
Like,
you hit on something too, I think big, where it takes a ton of, I don't know, 40 times more effort to create the risk management plan as a producer than it used to, being that with, the new AI tools like ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, you could plug this in, and say you could have different versions even nowadays,
yeah,
fast food, fast casual,
yep,
and so on. And you, as the producer, are the author of this risk management plan, and you have it almost published in a way. Says when you go make you have your meeting with the client, this is what you get. I creating myself as the expert, created this. It wasn't something off the shelf. So
yep.
now
And
you are
and
coming
and
in as the expert, and you're going to implement this risk management plan for them.
so this was what I was going to say before about your daughter. Like, we live in a golden age, right? If if I were doing something like that, like my mind immediately goes to, wow, that's probably a valuable document, right? Like that's like if I had gone that far, I'm going to go further. I'm probably going to stand up a podcast and I'm going to talk about restaurants and risk management and how to make a better restaurant. Like, the podcast doesn't have to center around insurance. As a matter of fact, I would highly recommend that you do not center it around insurance. I would highly recommend that you center it on your prospects and what's keeping them up at night, which is their business, right? So I would focus on that. I would create a podcast. And now when you're on that podcast, guess what you can market? The risk management plan. And if someone downloads the risk management plan or you hand it off to someone, who do you think they're going to want to get insurance pricing from?
Perfect.
Local,
That is a
local
genius.
bank.
You just created a whole this is the most valuable piece of this podcast today. What you just did here. We got set yourself up as the expert, as the producer, create your own risk management plan for whatever the niche is. And if you can and will do a podcast with that niche, interviewing these business owners, where by the way, that's your free education of their business.
Awesome. You even went further than I thought. That is exactly. I started a podcast many, many years ago, and it was specifically for I was starting an MGA. I didn't know anyone in the investment world. I didn't know enough people in the insurance world to move this thing forward. So I literally said, I'm going to start a podcast and I'm going to interview people. And not only am I going to learn more, which I did, right? But now I'm going to forge relationships. And what people don't understand is, like, yes, I did not monetize the podcast. It indirectly monetized me. I was sitting in a meeting in New York City, with a firm that we were asking both for venture capital and insurance capacity, for they did both. And before the meeting started, the CIO of that company leaned back in his chair, reached over, tapped me on the shoulder, and said, "By the way, I love your podcast."
Invaluable.
Now my former MGA is doing business with them. They knew more about me than I knew about them. And I would say the podcast was, for me, incredibly valuable. Not just the podcast. In this day and age, podcast, blogging, like, get yourself out there. It's so easy. Like, for your daughter, like, in this day and age with $400,000 of college debt, do you know how easy it is to stand up a side hustle online? Like, you could create a course on like simple Excel formulas and it's going to sell, right? If you do it right, it's going to sell. Like, there's the ability for us to stand stuff up and to produce really genuine, useful, interesting content. I mean, this is the golden age of human history for us to be able to do that. For your producer that's focused on restaurants, I'd be writing blogs. I would be reaching out to restaurant publications. I'd be reaching out to Condé Nast to write articles for them. I would look for every opportunity to highlight my wisdom, and I would do it for free, because the indirect side is you're going to get a ton of inbound activity. And Didn't we say, Eric? Isn't that the goal?
It
Isn't
is.
that the goal? That's the goal. And that's how you go about doing it.
No, I love it, man. So no, I think we could probably go. There's a million other things we could go into, I believe, on value add with data analytics, now that are available, the education
Well,
and
if you
compliance. I mean, there's just so
if
many.
you give me if you give me a couple minutes here, because data and analytics I think is huge. You don't always have to rely on third party for your data and analytics. If you're good, like for what I did, I generated my own data and my own analytics. Right? For me, I had access to tools that I could use where, you know, I wrote a paper for an MGA that was writing catastrophe risk for high net worth individuals. And we wanted to focus on Charleston, South Carolina. So I wrote a blog article on the anniversary of Hurricane Hugo, which was the biggest hurricane to make landfall in that area in recorded history. And what I did was, yeah, I talked about the event. That's easy to do. That's even the AI can do the research on that. What was hard to do though was that event occurred in like 1989. So, Eric, I took that event and I went and I plugged it into models that I had. And I basically said, if this event were to occur today, after now multiple decades of new building, what would happen? And what I showed was it was a $10 billion event back in 1989 in today's dollars. It would be a $50 billion event considering all of the new structures. So I added my own flair, I added my own information. And here's the thing, Eric, I can now update that article every single year because it needs to be updated on like when here's what would happen if Hurricane Hugo were to happen today and kind of trend that out. I've now generated my own data on that. And if someone's buying something in the Charleston area, this is an art. If you type in Hurricane Hugo, I don't know, I forget what the SEO was, but it's basically Hurricane Hugo. What would happen today? This is one of the articles that pops up to the top of that, and I think people in the Charleston area would be very interested in reading about that.
No, that's perfect. And I mean, taking it down to the back to our restaurant analogies again, I think over time, as you get as a producer, you get these clients, and let's say you do want to center around the risk, because of the new tools with AI, dumping that info of, let's say, the claim data without people's names and any of that information needing to be displayed, just raw data to say, this is my book of business of my clients as an aggregate, and we implemented this risk system over this amount of time. And here's the claim started at the agent, at the client at this level. And now each year, this is what it's looking like,
Yeah,
and be able to show a story that maybe could be like the appendix, of the risk management plan each year is updated, with the data
I love it.
to show that it
You're
worked. Yeah.
Man, you and I should start a company because we're just like bouncing ideas off of each other. That's brilliant. Like you
And
can
it
show
reminds me
trend.
of this other buddy of mine. We do this over beers. And I was just talking
Yeah,
about this with
yeah,
another friend.
exactly.
And we have the best conversations, and we walk away and we don't do anything. And 6 months later, we're talking again. We're not going to really do anything that we're talking about right here, right? So these are the best
Yes.
ideas I've ever had in my life. But
Yeah.
anyway, it's fun.
But that is a good idea. How many agents or brokers do you know of that trend premium data for their clients? Like both yours and here's a cross section of clients who are just like you, right? You anonymize the data. It's like here's where you fit in, right? I haven't seen it.
And here's how the risk management on the claims side works. The trend. You know, they started with
Yeah.
this date, and by this date, now that the trend was this.
Oh, that's the other aspect. You get that good and you begin to really build a niche and let's say you have a lot of inbound activity and you're just like killing it. Guess what? Now, when you talk about data, you could be the single source, best source of information around restaurant risk in the world, right? Because you have a cross section of clients right? So you absolutely should be hiring someone who's clever with data and analytics to put together reports around this. And like you said, there should be a report that goes out to your client every single year around before, instead of a renewal where you're talking about like insurance prices, it's a renewal where you're talking about here's where you stand compared to your peers. And I don't think there's a better tool to competitive business owners than to tell them like your peers are doing better than you on risk management. That usually gets their attention. Like,
Yeah,
well, I don't want
especially here are the ones that used return to work. Here are the ones that refused to do it because they didn't want to pay the wage to the employee to be a host that day rather than be back in the kitchen, even though they're a chef. Bring them back in. This is what happened when they implemented it. For those who did, here's their claim data. For those that didn't, here's their claim data.
to love it. Love it. We just built a business. Someone listening right now can, I think, literally take this, and this is the blueprint to do it. Listen, it's not easy, but it's simple, right? Like
No,
you
yeah,
just have to put
if you asked
the
me to
elbow
do
grease in.
this, if you asked me to do this a year and a half to 2 years ago before, Chat GPT, I would tell you to go F yourself. Now I would actually do something like this because I've seen the benefits of AI and how quick it is, and how like it can design the cover of your risk management, booklet,
Did
right?
it
So
did AI design the cover of your book?
it helped a lot. Yes. So we
Yeah.
uploaded the design, that I wanted and had it, kept tweaking it. PNC agents, have you run into Playbook, which is a Berkshire Hathaway company quoting workers' comp for either your prospects or clients? Well, great news. Insured Solutions, a national MGA, has an appointment that is set up to allow you to quote, bind, and service Playbook at your agency. And the coverage is in all states. It's A-rated. Startups are even accepted. There's 125,000 maximum premium. And some of the tough industries they write are construction, transportation that includes towing and parcel delivery, manufacturing, security guards that are armed and unarmed, motor mediation, and many more. So go to our website at insuredsolutions.net, click the Get Appointed link. We'll get you logins for you and your team and can set up a webinar for training if you'd like. Also, feel free to email info@insuredsolutions.net and I can handle the submission myself, or call 770-402-5343. Be glad to speak to you and give you more detail. Thanks.
There's literally no excuse. Like to me, the difference between true success, the way that we're describing it, and being a commodity. And being a commodity, you can still be like highly affluent. But you have to understand you're a commodity, so things can change. I think that difference is miles apart, but it just takes elbow grease. Like you have to decide you're going to do it and you're going to. But I don't know. I was in Murano, Italy, right? It's outside of Venice, and
Again, the glass.
this world famous for its glass and glass makers. I don't know about you, but there was a envy watching them work and just knowing this, like, this is their love, this is their craft, and they've perfected their craft, and they love showing their craft to everybody. There's I think a human affection towards people who are at the top of their craft, right? Like you just know they've given so much, they've sacrificed so much for their craft, and they deserve all of the benefits that come with that sacrifice that they gave for what it is that we're talking about. The sacrifice is time, right? It is mental focus. You have to read, you have to study. It's more than reading. You have to study, you have to put into action these things. And I think that's where most folks are not going to do it, Eric, because not that they're lazy, that could be a part of it, but like it requires sacrifice. I think anything good requires sacrifice, and if it's worthwhile and good, most folks are not willing to make the sacrifice because there are, you know, what would you rather do? Go to a bar where you can throw axes up against a board, or sit home and study for some exam where you can learn more about risk management. That's the
You're right.
difference.
You're right. You got to dedicate yourself to it. And again, the beautiful thing is these tools are just making it so much faster and easier. So thank heavens for that piece.
Yeah, but it is making it faster and easier. I worry that people are going to use the tools as a shortcut to wisdom. These tools don't will not give you wisdom. So there's no shortcut except that, I mean, you can engage with ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. You can engage with them. It could accelerate your learning, which is great. It's fantastic, but you still got to learn.
Right. No, it's a great way to aggregate the information, I think,
Yeah. Yeah.
fast and not have to click on a million links. But I definitely have seen errors, in it. So you got to be careful with that. But it is a great way to aggregate,
Yeah, absolutely.
for learning. Well, Nick, this has been fantastic. We created at least 2 or 3 different business models in this call, I think, for the
Where's
future.
my paycheck?
Yeah. When are we gonna get paid? But hey, if anybody wants to get in touch with you to kind of brainstorm on how to, improve their value add ability in their sales and marketing and risk management aspects of their career, like just be a sounding board or to get them going in the right direction. What's the best way for somebody to reach you?
I think there are probably two or three different ways to reach me. LinkedIn, I think, is the best one if you want to like watch me in action. Insurance Nerds, my company, follow that page and you will actually see me in action. So most of the content that gets generated on Insurance Nerds is mine, and I'm writing and I'm posting content similar to exactly what we described here. If you want to be provocative, if you want to come down a dirty gutter with me to learn more about provocativeness, follow me on Twitter, and you'll get a show. I can't tell you, there'll be some F bombs and other stuff, but it's fun. Come with me.
That's awesome. It's awesome. Hey, I've got to get down to see you in beautiful Naples soon. So I'll be going to
Let's
the
do
Tampa
that.
area, so I'll make that extra drive to get down there. I think I
Let's
have.
do
I've been
that.
as far as Sarasota. I've never been as far as Naples, so I gotta give it a shot. I hear great things.
Let's do it.
Sounds great, man. I do appreciate your time. Thanks for being on.
You got it. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks again for tuning in to Insurance Shop Talk. If you enjoyed our deep dive into the latest trends, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time, I'm Eric Stein, and this has been Insurance Shop Talk.